Well, I'm ready to give in. What about you, Donald Trump? For example, will you be able to make that Ukrainian scoundrel and his European buddies acknowledge our agreements? Because if you can't, then all of this is basically pointless.
Russia says it's ready for peace talks as long as the root causes of the war are addressed. Translation: Ukraine must surrender. Meanwhile, Moscow talks about peace while still bombing Ukrainian cities and, as always, denying it's them. And, of course, we are told the war is not prolonged by Kremlin but by Europe, which is apparently benefiting from the chaos on its own continent. New week, new nonsense from Russia. I'm Sofia and this is Spin Snipers, where we turn Kremlin drama into bite-sized reality checks. Over the past week, talk of peace negotiations and Trump's plan has dominated the headlines, once again reviving hope for peace in Ukraine, though not everything depends on Kyiv. One idea being floated is that Ukraine should make concessions and hand over Donbas to Russia. Trump argues Ukraine will have to give it up anyway and that Moscow will eventually take those territories on the battlefield. Give up Donbas? The problem is, Russia would not stop there, and for anyone who thinks this would work, let's listen to the official position of Russia's foreign minister.
We maintain the position that, of course, a diplomatic settlement is preferable. The meeting in Alaska was preceded by a visit of the U.S. President's special envoy, S. Witkoff, to Moscow with direct instructions from U.S. President D. Trump. S. Witkoff brought to the meeting with Russian President V. Putin concrete parameters for a settlement that took into account our fundamental approaches, namely, that it is necessary to focus on eliminating the root causes of this conflict, which we all know very well. The history of this drama began with the West's attempt to absorb Ukraine into the North Atlantic Alliance, creating a military threat to Russia right on our borders, contrary to and in violation of all the promises made to the Soviet Union.
So Ukraine keeps being told, better take the deal now while the terms are still good. Really? What exactly has changed in Russia's position since 2022, besides the talking points getting louder? Every week, Moscow lectures the world about the so-called root causes, conventionally forgetting that the root cause is Russia. The same country that spent years planting influence networks in Ukraine and then launched a war against a neutral state. Yes, neutral. Before 2014, Ukraine had a non-aligned, non-nuclear status, and NATO membership was more a political daydream than a policy. Ironically, Russia itself, with the NATO-Russia Council, was far closer to NATO than Ukraine ever was. And just to be clear, even Russian state TV is not pretending Moscow is ready for real peace talks right now.
Nothing has changed since Anchorage. There, together with Trump, we outlined some contours of a possible project. Yes, some contours, especially since they wanted this meeting. They asked, "This is no longer my imagination." A month ago, when I said this, it was my reconstruction. Now, the president of Russia has confirmed it. They asked us for certain, let's say, concessions. We even made them. But when someone makes a concession to you, it creates an obligation. It's a matter of culture. Well, I'm ready to give in. What about you, Donald Trump? For example, will you be able to make that Ukrainian scoundrel and his European buddies acknowledge our agreements? Because if you can't, then all of this is basically pointless.
Russia is not being asked to make any concessions. Russian talking heads are already declaring Ukraine the losing side and shouting, Ukraine can't be trusted, yet somehow Ukraine is expected to sign a so-called peace deal blindly and just hope for security guarantees from the partners. A quick reminder, Russia attacked Ukraine twice in 2014 and again in 2022 and has broken agreements more times than anyone can count. So Kyiv can be trusted? Really?
On top of that, when Zelensky shouts and Europe shouts, Russians, stop, let this be a gesture of goodwill. But we already stopped once, and we already showed a gesture of goodwill when we pulled our troops back from Kyiv and the entire northern encirclement. That was the gesture of goodwill the Europeans had asked for. That's it. All gestures of goodwill are over. You can't keep trying to deceive us every time and pretend that everyone has forgotten. So it will be dealt with to the very end.
So, Ukraine is supposed to trust Moscow's peace intentions while in the middle of all the headlines about possible talks, Russia launched attacks on civilian cities. On the night and morning of November 25th, during all the Trump-planned chatter, Russia struck Ukraine with 22 missiles, including aeroballistic types, and over 460 drones, mostly Russian-Iranian Shaheds. In Kyiv, 7 people were killed, 21 injured, including a child. The main target, Ukraine's energy infrastructure, trying to freeze the citizens. But of course, Russian TV insists, we don't kill civilians, it's all fake. And yes, that includes the massacre in Bucha.
Because we continue to demand an honest and objective investigation into the tragedies in Bucha. And note how many years have passed. Neither the French gendarmerie nor the British forensic services, which took up the investigations, have issued an official conclusion. So they left a bad aftertaste, but no investigation. And this is exactly what Macron is now basing his claims on. The Russians are doing not a single fact. Russian drones. Where? What makes you think they are Russian? Is there at least one court ruling? Has anyone been caught red-handed? Everything Macron has been saying. That is why I consider him a lying bastard. And then on top of that, taking money from Ukraine. And not only for him, but also for his woman. For another gender reassignment surgery.
Amazing. Russian propaganda is once again demanding a fair investigation into Bucha. After more than 3 years, they still can ask, where are the conclusions? Where are the proofs? The truth? UN, ICC, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, Bellingcat, BBC, New York Times, all have documented it. Satellite images, Russian units, eyewitness accounts, exhumations, DNA, timelines. But for Moscow, that's not enough. Apparently, evidence only counts if it comes with the Kremlin stamp. 3 years in, and they solemnly declare Ukraine untrustworthy. Meanwhile, Macron talks about Russian drones and they scream, how do you know they're Russian? Where is the court ruling? The logic is perfect. War, no court. No court, nothing proven. War ends, old news. Meanwhile, drones fly from Russian territory with serial numbers, Russian components, Russian routes, but somehow they got lost on the way to a peace festival. And the funniest part, they claim to want the truth, just a truth without investigation, without evidence, without accountability, straight from the Kremlin playbook. And since Russia brought up Macron, let's hear what Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says about him and Europe. Apparently, European values are less about democracy or freedom of speech and more about Nazism.
The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, made an extremely aggressive statement today, claiming that the only problem regarding Ukraine is Russia and its demands. Supposedly, Russia is engaged in a strategic confrontation with the Europeans, and therefore, they must prove that they will never surrender in the face of a force that threatens them. He stated that after a settlement, he plans to send troops to the area of Kyiv and Odessa, These are merely dreams that have nothing to do with a peaceful resolution. When Europeans say that they must stand with Ukraine until the end because Ukraine is fighting for their European values, this amounts to a confession. It means that Europe is encouraging the ideology and practice of Nazism that has been legalized in Ukraine. It means that Europe is encouraging racism, which has taken the form of legislative bans on the Russian language and on everything Russian.
Meanwhile, as usual, Russia's propaganda has turned its sights on the UK, with talking heads and their intelligence sources blaming London for wanting to prolong the war and derail any peace talks.
Europeans decided to act quickly. Starmer stated that Europe will work with the existing peace plans. In reality, there will be no peace. The Russian side has stated that the British aim to prolong the war. They are making good money from it. Macron accuses Russia of having entered into strategic confrontation with the Europeans. The West disrupts the peace process every time, which is why Moscow approaches negotiations professionally.
Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation has confirmed that Russians are spreading fake claims, repeatedly blaming Ukraine and the UK for exactly what Russia itself is guilty of.
Previously, the Foreign Intelligence Service, headed by Sergei Naryshkin, a longtime associate of the Russian dictator Putin, repeatedly spread false accusations against the United Kingdom, including claims that Britain, together with Ukraine, was preparing terrorist attacks in Europe. However, most of this agency's informational special operations ended in complete failure. The real purpose of spreading such fantasies is to shift responsibility for the continuation of the war onto Britain, even though the only thing currently preventing the establishment of peace is the Kremlin's position.
Indeed, Russian propagandists have gone after the UK hard. Some even call for punishing its leaders and Ukraine's too. That's what they call a peaceful peace.
Donald Trump as well. He's not a simple guy. He went to London and talked to them. They don't understand. They don't agree. He talked to the king, he talked to MI6. They don't agree. So what should we do then? All right, we'll strike them one by one. I can't reach the royal house yet. That's the answer to your question, because it's not MI6 that needs to be killed. It's the royal house, the clan. But I can't get to them yet. But I can reach that pimple, that green one, meaning Zelensky. We've reached people far more difficult than him before.
As for peace talks, there is really no doubt Russia is not interested in them at all, and on the top of that, wants to push Europe aside. Europe is the one of the few actors actually standing up for international law and Ukraine's right to exist as an independent, sovereign country, which, believe it or not, in the 21st century still somehow seems remarkable. Meanwhile, Russia acts like respecting borders and sovereignty is optional, and anyone who disagrees is suddenly the problem.
The United States, in principle, has demonstrated that it is acting as a mediator now. To answer Dimitri's question, Europe is certainly not a mediator. It is a spoiler. It participates in the negotiations in order for them to fail. Therefore, even if the United States formally tells Europe after the talks, guys, you are not participating, this may actually be a good step, so that the Ukrainian side perceives more soberly what the Russian diplomats will tell them, once we receive these points and begin substantive negotiations.
Even the laziest commentators had to weigh in on Trump's plan, and of course, here comes Alexander Lukashenko, self-proclaimed president, full-time Belarusian dictator, suggesting Minsk as a place for peace talks. Keep in mind, he's Putin's best buddy, and in 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine right from his backyard. So yeah, inviting him to mediate peace is like asking the Azanists to run the fire brigade.
If you ever wish to come back to Minsk again, you know, we are always ready. As for Ukraine, we are often reproached, in conversations with Westerners, with the Americans. When they start talking about this, I ask them, did you really not know that we are not just close peoples, but that our actions are legally grounded? We are allies. Therefore, even the Americans, to their credit, never raised this issue, never. Once they cut it off completely, put it in brackets, and there should be no discussion about it. I hope that everything will eventually be fine, considering recent developments. If the Americans, and now I'll say publicly what I told them carefully, behave prudently, they will understand that this is not a simple issue and that it requires difficult decisions.
This is for today. While the Russian propaganda machine keeps running, we'll keep exposing their lies. I'm Sofia, and this was Spin Snipers. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and don't fall for the spin.